Listen closely, my friends. You have said something in anger that you cannot take back. Maybe it was to someone you love. Maybe it was at work. Maybe it was in a moment that felt completely justified, where everything in you was screaming, "This is wrong. This person is wrong." And the words came out, fast, sharp, exactly the way the anger wanted them to. And then the moment passed, the anger cooled, and you were left standing in what you had said, in the silence that followed, in the look on the other person's face, in the weight of knowing that what happened in the next 30 seconds was going to take weeks to repair. And you thought, why do I keep doing this? Why does it happen so fast? Why does the anger always arrive before the wisdom? Here is the answer: because the anger was never trained. It was just allowed to arrive whenever it wanted, allowed to speak whenever it wanted, allowed to make decisions and say words and damage things that the calmer version of you would never have chosen. And today, that changes, because the Stoics, 2,000 years ago, figured out something about anger that most people alive today still do not know. Anger is not your enemy. The unexamined anger is. And examining it, understanding it, training it, is the most powerful thing you will ever do for every relationship, every opportunity, and every version of the life you are trying to build. Marcus Aurelius spent decades being tested, not in small ways. Wars, plagues, betrayal, loss, people who challenged him, undermined him, tried to manipulate and deceive and outmaneuver him every single day. And he had the power to destroy any of them with a word. But he almost never did, not because he did not feel anger. He felt it. He wrote about it in his private journal. A journal he never intended anyone to read. He wrote about the irritation of difficult people, the frustration of situations beyond his control, the specific heat that rises when someone acts wrongly, and you have the power to respond, but wisdom tells you not to. And then he wrote about what he did with it, not suppression, not performance of calm, something more sophisticated, something more powerful, something that the next section of this video is going to give you. Accurate 1. Understand what anger actually is. Before you can control anything, you have to understand it. And most people fundamentally misunderstand anger. They think anger is the emotion. It is not. Anger is the signal. It is your internal alarm system telling you, something here feels wrong, something here feels unfair, something here feels like a threat to something I value. And that signal, that information, is not bad. It is useful. The problem is not the signal. The problem is what most people do with the signal. They skip the understanding and go straight to the reaction. They do not ask, what is this anger telling me? They just react. And the reaction, coming from the signal without the understanding, is almost always disproportionate, almost always aimed at the wrong target, almost always says something the calmer version of you would never choose to say. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." The anger is not about what happened. The anger is about what you decided the thing that happened means. Someone was late, and you decided it means they do not respect your time. Someone questioned your idea, and you decided it means they think you are incompetent. Someone did not respond, and you decided it means they are ignoring you deliberately. And the decision, the interpretation, is where the anger lives, not in the event, in the meaning you gave the event. And meanings, unlike events, can be changed. The first secret of Stoic anger control is understanding that the anger is not the problem. The interpretation that created it is where the work begins. Of Accurate 2, find the gap. This is the most important thing in this entire video, and it is the simplest. Between what happens to you and what you do next, there is a space, a tiny space. Sometimes it feels like a fraction of a second, but it is always there. And in that space, your entire freedom lives. Because in that space, the event has arrived, the interpretation has formed, the anger is present, but the action has not happened yet. And in that gap, you have a choice. Most people never find the gap. The stimulus arrives and the reaction follows, so fast, so automatically, that the gap never gets used. The gap was always there, but the trigger moved so fast, and the reaction was so practiced, so habitual, that the gap passed without being occupied. The Stoic practice, built through daily discipline, is learning to find the gap, to inhabit it, even for a moment, even for 3 seconds, even for the time it takes to breathe once. Marcus Aurelius called it the ruling faculty, the part of the mind that sits in the gap, observes what arrived, and chooses what comes next. Not the anger's choice. Yours. How do you build the gap? You practice it in small moments, not in the big ones. Because the big moments, the ones that really test you, are not where the gap gets built. They are where it gets used. The gap gets built in the ordinary moments. Someone says something slightly irritating at dinner. Find the gap. Someone drives badly near you on the road. Find the gap. Someone sends an email with a tone that lands wrong. Find the gap. 3 seconds. Breathe. Choose. Build the habit in the small moments. And when the large moments arrive, the gap will be there, already built, ready to be used. Acronym 3. Ask one question before you react. When the anger arrives, before you say anything, before you do anything, ask yourself one question. Will this reaction make things better or worse? Not, am I right to be angry? Not, does this person deserve my anger? Will this reaction make things better or worse? And be honest. Because here is the thing about anger reactions. They almost never make things better. They escalate, they damage, they say things that linger. They create distance where connection was trying to live. They win the moment and lose the week. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the circumstances that aroused it?" Write that again. The consequences of the anger, more harmful than the thing that caused it. Every time you have acted from anger, think about the aftermath, the conversations that had to happen, the repairs that had to be made, the trust that had to be rebuilt. All of it cost more than whatever the original situation was worth. One question: will this make things better or worse? If the honest answer is worse, the anger does not get to speak. Not because you are suppressing it, because you, the person in the gap, made a different choice. Acronym 4. Name the anger out loud. This one sounds strange, but the neuroscience behind it is extraordinary. When something triggers you, when the anger starts to rise, say it. Out loud if possible, inside your head if not. I am feeling angry right now. Or, this situation is making me very frustrated. Or, I notice anger arriving. Just the naming, nothing more. And here is what happens when you name it. The amygdala, the part of the brain that fires the anger response, loses some of its dominance. The prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, the part that can actually navigate what to do next, gets activated because naming requires language, and language requires the thinking brain. And the thinking brain, once active, can begin to do what the anger brain cannot: reason, consider, choose. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be before you react from anger." Name what you are experiencing, not to perform it, not to broadcast it, just to yourself. Quickly, I am angry right now. And watch what naming does to the anger. It does not eliminate it, but it moves it from the driver's seat to the passenger seat, where it can still be felt, but where you, not the anger. Act 5. Stop feeding the stories. This is the secret that most people miss. Because here is what happens after anger arrives. The event occurs, the interpretation forms, the anger rises. And then, the mind starts telling a story about how wrong the other person is, about everything they have done before that led to this moment, about how this is part of a pattern, about what this means about them as a person, about what they probably think of you, about how this is going to keep happening. And the story, unlike the original event, does not end. The event lasted 30 seconds. The story runs for 30 hours, or 30 days. And every time the story runs, the anger gets a new charge, fresh energy, another reason to stay alive, another justification to remain. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let the wrong that is done go unconfirmed in the mind." Unconfirmed. Do not keep running the event in your mind, building the case, adding the evidence, confirming the story, because the story is not the event. The story is the mind doing what the mind does, creating narrative, finding patterns, building a case. And the case it builds is almost always more extreme than the evidence warrants. Here is the practice. When you catch the story running, notice it, name it, and then do not add to it. Do not give it the next piece of evidence. Do not replay the moment again. Just notice the story is running and gently redirect to something else. Not because the anger was unjustified, because the story, the extended story, is costing you energy that belongs somewhere more useful. Accurate 6. See the other person clearly. This is the Stoic practice that is hardest to implement, and most transformative when you do. When you are angry at someone, the mind does something automatic. It narrows. It focuses on what they did wrong and on the specific behavior that triggered the anger. And in that narrowed focus, the person becomes one-dimensional. The person who did the wrong thing. That is all they are in that moment. The person who was late. The person who said the wrong thing. The person who undermined you. And the anger, aimed at that one-dimensional version, feels completely justified, because the one-dimensional version deserves the anger. But here is what Marcus Aurelius practiced. Every time someone made him angry, he zoomed out. He looked at the whole person, not just the behavior. He considered, what are they carrying right now? What kind of day are they having? What do they believe about the situation that led them to this behavior? Are they acting from malice, or from fear, or from exhaustion, or from a blind spot they do not even know they have? He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, today I will meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." He was not being cynical. He was being prepared. He was reminding himself, before the day began, that the difficult behavior of people is part of the human landscape, not a personal attack, not a conspiracy against him specifically, part of being human. And the person who sees difficult behavior as part of being human, rather than a personal assault, has access to a completely different emotional response, not excuse, not acceptance of mistreatment, understanding. And understanding does not require you to be okay with what happened. It just removes the fuel that turns ordinary anger into something that costs too much. Accurate 7. Use the anger as fuel, not as fire. This is the distinction that changes everything. Anger, real anger, contains energy, significant energy, the same energy that, used wrong, becomes the words you cannot take back, the decisions you will regret, the damage that takes weeks to repair. But that same energy, redirected, becomes something completely different: motivation, clarity, the specific drive of someone who has been pushed and has decided to respond not with words, but with work, not with an angry reaction, but with a deliberate building of something better. Seneca wrote, "Anger is not power. It is proof that you have been moved by something outside yourself. But the energy beneath the anger, that is yours, and you can choose what to do with it." The next time you feel anger arriving, after you have named it, after you have found the gap, after you have asked whether the reaction makes things better or worse, ask one more question: what can I build from this energy? And because the anger that turned into motivation, that turned into disciplined work, that turned into the quiet, determined pursuit of something worth having, has produced more genuinely powerful results in the history of human achievement than anger that just reacted. React from anger, and you get a moment of expression. Build from anger, and you get a life. Act 8. Practice in the easy moments. This is the secret that separates the person who understands Stoic anger control from the person who actually has it. Because most people hear these ideas and wait for the next big emotional moment to apply them. They think, next time someone really makes me angry, I will find the gap. I will name it. I will ask the question. Then, and the next big moment arrives, and the anger moves so fast, and the habit is not yet built, and they react exactly the way they always have. Because the big moments are not where the skill gets built. They are where the skill gets used. The skill gets built in the small moments. The moments of mild irritation. The moment someone interrupts you, and you feel the flash of annoyance. Don't find the gap there. The moment someone is 5 minutes late, and you feel the frustration beginning, name it there. The moment an email arrives with a tone that lands wrong. Ask the question there. These are not significant moments. Nobody is watching. Nobody will know whether you practiced. But you will build the habit, the muscle memory of finding the gap, of naming the feeling, of choosing rather than reacting. And when the moment arrives, the real one, the one that tests everything, the habit will be there, built in 100 small invisible moments that nobody else ever saw. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every day in his journal, not just when things were hard, every day, building the habit, returning to the practice, making it automatic, so that when the empire tested him, which it did, constantly, the response was not a struggle. It was a habit. Build yours in the small moments, starting today. Accurate 9, give the anger a delay. This is the most practical technique in this entire video. And the simplest. When you feel anger rising, and you are not sure what to do with it, give it a delay. Before you respond, before you send the message, before you make the call, before you say the thing, wait not forever. 10 minutes, an hour, overnight, however long it takes for the heat of the initial reaction to settle, and for the clearer version of you to arrive, because the clearer version always arrives, always. Given enough time, and the clearer version almost always has a different response, a better response, one that says what needed to be said, without the collateral damage of the angry version. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay, not suppression, delay. Let the anger exist. Let it be real, just. Do not let it act immediately. Give it the delay. And watch what happens to the response you were about to make. When you see it from the other side of the anger, from the version of you that is calmer, clearer, more aligned with who you actually want to be, that response, the one from the delay, is almost always the right one. The one from the heat almost never is. Accurate 10, build the daily practice. Everything we have talked about in this video, all 9 secrets, are practices, not insights, practices. And practices require daily repetition to become real. The person who reads about finding the gap, but never practices finding it, will not find it when it matters. The person who understands naming the anger, but never names it in the small moments, will not be able to name it in the large ones. The skill is built through repetition, through the daily, often invisible, often unrecognized, practice of returning to these principles. Every morning, before the day has a chance to test you, remind yourself, I will feel anger today. It will arrive. And when it does, I will find the gap. I will name it. I will ask whether my reaction makes things better or worse. I will not feed the story. I will see the person clearly. I will use the energy for something better. I will practice in the small moments. I will give the anger the delay it needs. Not as a performance, as a genuine daily preparation, the way Marcus Aurelius prepared every morning. In the quiet, before the empire arrived, for whatever the day was going to ask of him, he wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, say to yourself, today I will meet with all kinds of difficult things, and I will be ready, not because the difficult things would not arrive, because he had built the practice that could meet them. Build yours every day, in the quiet before the world begins, and watch what happens to the anger that used to speak before you could stop it. It does not disappear. It does not become smaller. It becomes yours. under your authority, speaking only when you choose to let it speak, and staying quiet when the quiet is the wiser choice. So here are the 10 secrets. Understand that anger is the signal, not the enemy. Find the gap between stimulus and response. Ask one question before you react. Name the anger out loud. Stop feeding the stories. See the other person clearly. Use the anger as fuel, not as fire. Practice in the easy moments. Give the anger the delay it needs. Build the daily practice. None of these are complicated. None of them require special talent or unusual discipline. They require one thing: the daily decision to be someone who chooses their response, rather than someone whose responses choose them. And that decision, made every day, in the quiet, in the small moments, in the ordinary invisible practice of finding the gap, is how Stoicism destroys anger, not by removing it, by putting it in its proper place, as information, as energy, as a signal worth hearing, and a force worth redirecting from the person who reacts into the person who chooses every time. Marcus Aurelius wrote one final thing I want to leave you with. He wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury, not to react with anger, not to meet fire with fire, to be fundamentally unlike the thing that tried to pull you out of yourself, to remain yourself clearly, calmly, powerfully, in the full knowledge that the anger arrived, and you were bigger than it. That is not weakness. That is the specific strength that the Stoics spent their entire lives building. And it is available to you, right now, in whatever moment the anger is waiting for you today. Find the gap and choose. If this gave you something real, share it with someone whose anger is costing them things they cannot afford to lose. New Stoic wisdom every single week.